So, in terms of what we need to look at tonight, and we will again focus on a bit of this on Monday night, is the controlling process. And when we look at the controlling process, it really is that step where we get to realize that planning and controlling in terms of the management process are Siamese twins. Because the reality is, without a plan, you can't do the sort of purpose stuff. You cannot look at the forms. You cannot look at budgets. You cannot look at different ways of controlling your processes and your structures. And most importantly, you cannot control the standards, etc. So the key thing that we need to remember in terms of control is you cannot have control unless you have planning. And we see planning and control as Siamese twins. And I know that sounds a little bit weird. And we'll see in a second why these go together. So when we look at planning and control, I think for me, control is about standards. It's about maintaining standards. It is about measuring different elements of the organization in terms of performance, etc., against standards. Now, the only way you can measure against standards is when you actually have standards. So, part of doing your controlling processes is to establish your standards. Is anyone here in operations, in manufacturing, or something like that? Anyone in manufacturing? But you'll often hear manufacturers and assemblers is a better term now for big companies because they really just Lego block things together, would be tolerances. And those tolerances are the standards that we accept and that people cannot deviate from. If we think of Formula One racing, one of the key standards is how long the car is stationary in the pits. If you are spending 3 seconds to do the change of tires, you are losing 100 meters down the straight. So, in terms of standards, you'll see that every one of those teams will train and practice. And I think the fastest wheel or tire change ever was something like 1.8 seconds. And I'm sure that I shared that with you guys on this group already. But the only way you can figure out what the level is that we expect those teams to perform at is to be able to have a clear set of standards. Rugby, and I don't know if we have any rugby followers here, but under Jake White had a very clear standard that for you to play in the forwards, you had to be able to bench press a certain amount in terms of kgs. If you couldn't do it, you couldn't play for South Africa. In American football, the kickers, for example, the guys who kick out of hand, when they kick the ball must be able to stay in the air for a certain period of time. If they can't do it, they don't qualify. In terms of the quarterbacks, their standard is insane. It's hitting a square, um, not even a square meter, a moving target at 50 meters, at 30 meters. So all of these are clear standards that we have when we think of control. So what I thought I would do today is share this one here, and it is a set of service delivery standards. Okay, so this is obviously a professional body. In terms of the professional body, what it does, it gives us an idea that if you are going to be a member of this professional body, these are the standards that you'll have to maintain. So in terms of turnaround times, in terms of emails, they give 10 working days. In terms of Twitter or Facebook, 24 hours. And each of those then essentially become the standards that we hold and they hold their members to. Give me examples of standards that you guys have in your own organization. Because without standards, you can't control. Without planning, you can't have standards, you can't control. Give me examples of standards that you have. Who has a standard in terms of answering calls? So incoming calls. Who has a standard in terms of incoming calls? Because generally companies will have a standard that says at the switchboard, you have to answer every phone call within the first 3 rings. So when you appoint a receptionist, that person knows what the standard is. Other standards that you guys have? Why is it so quiet, guys? You must work with for standard would be a recipe for baking. Absolutely. I mean, you can control against that recipe 100%. Give me your school timetables. When must they be out by? Absolute, Russigan. Data capture is so many words or so many inputs per minute. Other standards. Who has standards in terms of their own job that are provided? I did look for these earlier, and they seem not to be available at the moment. Yeah, SOPs they slightly different, but linked to every standard operating procedure. There should be standards. I looked for the McDonald's standards today, and McDonald's, when they came to South Africa, made a big noise about the moment you get to the front, you will be served and your food will be ready in so many minutes. They have standards in terms of their drive-through as well, that by the time you get, when you go place your order at the drive-through, by the time you get to the payment and the collection, the item would be there. So in McDonald's, they have cameras that watch this stuff. In Pietermaritzburg, what they do is when they're being slow, they normally push you through and they tell you to park, and somebody will bring you out your food 10 minutes later. So all these standards are important in terms of creating the right impression. So when we look at what we use control for, so the first one is to obviously adjust to change in the environment. We've spoken about how we make predictions in the environment. Yes, absolutely, Mandy. Those mystery customers are very, very important in terms of those kinds of customer customer experience standards. Yeah, I like the idea of mystery customers because it allows people to almost realize that the next person I deal with could be my mystery customer. I love the idea of mystery customers. Really, really like the idea of mystery customers. In terms of your traditional reasons for control, the first one there is to adapt to environmental change. And we had said how we create strategic plans and our strategies based on assumptions. Sometimes our assumptions about the future are not accurate. And the moment those assumptions are not accurate, you need to update, you need to adjust, you need to almost re strategize and change your plans that you had in place. So if we think of what happened with COVID, everyone was on track, and then all of a sudden, COVID happened. Now, what do we do in terms of survival? The second one is the idea of accumulation of error. If you think of a traditional production line, hold on a second. I actually need to find a better way of using paint, because really and truly the mess that I create is is not ideal. But if you think of your traditional just use a brush rather, of your traditional production line. A production line has different elements and different stages that the item goes through. If, for example, and we've seen this too many times, if there is an error there, that error is repeated there, etc. And the challenge then is you could have a completed item with an error in. And the one thing that anyone who works in manufacturing or in operations will tell you, the biggest swear word for them, other than downtime, is rework. Because what rework means is this thing has to go into your system again. And the idea of getting your items through in time in terms of standards is gone. So the first reason we have standards is that we have to deal with tolerances. A couple of years ago, and I don't know if anyone remembers this, Tata airbags, back faults. Yeah, sorry, it's right at the top here. Tata airbag control, a recall. This is a classic example of what happens when standards go out the window. That one is not ideal. Let me go per brand. Tata recall vehicle list. Yeah, I'll have to share this. So this is not too bad because those all are Nissans. But if you look at this one here, the 6 million vehicles with the recalled, gosh, I always worry what I'm going to see here. So what has happened in terms of this, guys, is, and this isn't even the Tata one, this is the Takata one. What has happened in terms of this one is in your production process, in building the car, the airbag that people shoved into the vehicle over there was faulty. And it resulted in a 6 million vehicle recall. Can I also just say that's not a lot? Generally, on average, we recall millions of vehicles a year because of standards being ignored in terms of the production process. Has anyone ever driven a vehicle that was recalled because of a dodgy part? Okay, so no one here. So let's have a glance at whether your vehicle is potentially one of those that is going to or could be recalled. No, I wouldn't do that. That would be quite horrible. Right, so let's just go back one. And in 2024, Tata has again buggered up and they are recalling. Okay, so these are all, but have a glance at that, guys. It's this ongoing process, and Ford was affected, Toyota was affected, and it's this real issue in terms of standards being ignored. Water bottle on a Ford Focus. That's not too bad, Russigan. That's not too bad. This one is big, guys, because the error message from this is that it gave you a do not drive warning because of this. This was obviously Ford, and they normally recall per your age when the vehicle was absolutely built. So actually built, sorry. So in terms of these recall things, we see that. So from an accumulation of error, it is if you put in a faulty bit, that knock-on effect is long term, and obviously from a reputational perspective could be quite serious. The next one is to deal with the complexities within an organization. So when we think of organizational complexity, modern organizations have so many layers and so many connects and so many interactions and so many aspects that they have to look after. That generally now what people will do is they'll have points of control across the entire organization. And those points of control will often spark where there is an issue. So if, for example, there is a bottleneck in a on a production line somewhere, some manager's dashboard would flash, and that would immediately then start a control process and a corrective process. And it's about minimizing costs. I think the notion of rework and the idea of having to take an item through a production line that has already cost you a heck of a lot is an expensive exercise. So in terms of control, yeah, different areas, different levels, and then also lots of aspects, the different types of control, and I am going to go through some of this fairly quickly. Physical control, that would obviously be your plant, machinery, equipment, and your maintenance, etc. Human would obviously be the standards that we set to our employees, your KPIs, whichever KPA version. Information standards, we talk about information being the lifeblood of an organization. So we have certain standards that we set regarding the quality and the timeliness of our information, and financial standards is generally budgets and budgetary control. So if we look at the different levels of control, not too worried about it. This is the one that I want to spend a bit of time on, guys. This is an NB. Okay, this is an NB. This is a reasonably important one. So when we think of the actual control process, and I hope you guys are reading between the lines when I say NB. When we look at the control process and its relationship with planning, sorry to come back to my messy drawing here, it is so not great. Right. So we know that in terms of planning, we have different steps. We set objectives. Once we set objectives, we create plans or strategies that will take us to the objectives. Those objectives, in terms of planning, being our endpoints, and these strategies essentially being the roads that we travel to get to those objectives. Now, those objectives are set at different levels. They set in terms of strategic objectives. The things that take us to strategic objectives will always be our strategies. You will have your functional objectives, and those would be your tactics in terms of your functional areas, and then your operational objectives will be your plans. It doesn't matter which term you use. It's all about the roads that you travel to get to a particular endpoint. So if that is the planning process, that objective, in order to make sure that we are able to, in terms of control, in terms check for standards against that objective, is that objective will translate to a particular standard. So if I have, as part of my KPIs, a customer service objective, what kind of standards would link to a customer service or a customer satisfaction objective? Let's make a customer satisfaction objective. And it's easy to have a customer satisfaction objective because you can say that in terms of customer satisfaction rating, we expect your rating to be at 90+%. What would be a standard in terms of customer service if you have one of those objectives? Time delivery. So turnaround time, reaction time, action time to your customer. What else, guys, could be the quality of your service? So the quality of your interaction. I'm actually quite frustrated at my private banker. My wife paid for a holiday using the credit card, and the holiday people wanted a statement, a receipt. Now, our credit card doesn't, the system doesn't allow for the credit card to come out. It's taken me 3 days of waiting for my private banker to come back to me. She still hasn't come back to me. Now, when you think of in Standard Bank how much I pay for the privilege of a private banker, you would expect that that is a very, very poor showing in terms of standards, because your turnaround time, it's awful customer service, but it's measurable. It's absolutely measurable, and that's frustration with these kinds of things. Now, whether they have standards in terms of customer service, I don't know. I really, really don't know. But the truth is, I think standards are lacking in terms of what my people do. Guys, any other standards in terms of customer service, in terms of customer satisfaction ratings? Okay, let's use another one. Standards in terms of um, standards, if you have an objective that says improved levels of productivity. Follow up, that's another one, Boya. And the time period that you follow up, that's the time that you allocate. Guys, so in terms of productivity, if you have a standard in terms of productivity, yes, feedback as well, 100%, Tanya. In terms of productivity, if you have a traditional production line that goes like that, each of those steps in the production line gets allocated a certain amount of time within which that's the one, Chelsea, spot on, spot on. A certain amount of time which each of those stops in your production line has to complete their bit in the transformation process. And then if we look at Formula One racing, sorry, does anyone watch Formula One? I know I've asked this before. Okay, fantastic, Charles. There is no better Mercedes, Tyler, yeah, Tanya. There's no better standard than the turnaround time in terms of a vehicle coming in, the tires being changed, the AirPods. Oh, you even play a fantasy. Fantastic. I love that. I love that, Charles. And then obviously, how long the car is stationary and how long it leaves for. I'm very sure the quickest ever is something like 1.8 seconds, which was Red Bull. I know Lotus was very good in the day when they were still racing. These standards are important, guys. So in terms of the first bit here, you and please, please, please remember this, guys, for the exam. You need to be able to suggest a standard. Now, whether it's customer service, or you might have to identify how a company sets their own standards. So, in terms of those standards, that is where we start. Whether it's time, turnaround, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's monetary standards in terms of budgets, it doesn't matter. The second step in the process is once you have the standard, it's completely useless having a standard if you don't actually monitor someone's performance. So the expected performance is that. What normally happens is you will monitor someone's performance, and the performance, the actual performance must be as damn close as possible to the actual required performance. Because unless you can narrow the gap between the actual performance and the required performance, why have a standard? It's completely irrelevant then if you have a standard. So generally the focus in terms of your measurement is to, once you've compared the standards, is to figure out how to move the person who is at this level of performance to the ideal, the standard set. Now, that could be a variety of interventions. It could be training, it could be counseling and discipline, etc. You need a tool to measure it. Absolutely, Tanya, 100%. And that's why we have KPIs. That's why, and some of the tools are so easy. You know, you can do an assessment standard about someone's performance. And then the thinking is to move that performance level to there. And it doesn't matter whether your tool is a budget, whether it's tolerances, whether it is time measures, you need to agree that tool. I mean, another standard which I think sometimes people don't consider to be a standard is the zero point 0.8 alcohol level in your blood. I don't even know what is the blood standard that you over. If you're above that, you can't drive. Is it 0.4 or 0.8 to be above the limit for driving? I don't actually know. I don't ever drive under the influence. So I've never thought of it. Um, it's 0.05. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Thank you, Tanya. Sorry, I had it behind there. I don't know how much how many beers or well, I drink beer, so it couldn't be anything else. But it's another standard, guys. We have all these wonderful standards. The 120 k's an hour. It can't be. I can't imagine. Mind you, I weigh 85, so I'm pretty sure I can have at least one beer before I can't drive. um, so yeah, no. Gosh, that's very, very little. And then your corrective action, guys. In terms of if there is a if there is a if somebody performs to standard, then you don't have to worry. That's when somebody is deficient, short on the standard, and then sometimes you change standards. Um, and can I just say, take a lot standard. My favorite is how they will deliver in 24 hours. It's a standard that I think exists in theory sometimes. Checkers 6060 is a standard. Now they can easily measure it. You are kidding me, Tanya. You are kidding me. Yeah, yeah. That's very impressive. But Checkers 6060 is a standard, guys, and it's easy to measure. You can see in terms of the person's app when the stuff was available, when it was dropped off, the time it took to get the bag filled. I don't know if we talked about, I'm sure we have. Who uses Checkers 6060? I've never ever used 6060. I know my kid uses it all the time. Once, how did that go, Mandy? Mandy, how did that go your one time? Easiest delivery. Is it always within 60 minutes, Chelsea? Oh, that's impressive. That's impressive. And my understanding is that the delivery guys are very friendly as well. Yeah. So, guys, in terms of this, please remember this model. Be able just 20 minutes. That is very, very, very impressive. That is very impressive. Gosh, that is impressive. So, in terms of this model, guys, be able to apply this to a case study, and I think if you go to your case studies, you'll see potentially where it will be used. So please remember that process in terms of your exam prep. Are there any questions at this stage? Oh, yes. Oh, that's also true, Mandy. Yeah. And that was still the fledgling stages of 6060. Hey, guys, any questions on this one? I want everyone to be quite comfortable with this one. Know the process, obviously, and be able to apply the process to a case study. If this were a question, how would that go? As a very, I think it should be absolutely fine. Anyone else? Okay. Tyler, that's what you want for this boy. So for me, there are these givens. Some of the questions will be tough, but some of them you should be able to do because all it requires is just to think about your own realities. Is if you want, think about Checo 6060. Think about the 1.8 seconds stop time in Grand Prix to have your tires changed. All of those are very, very clear standards. So in terms of operations control, yeah, so this is one of those standard areas, and it's the production line that I spoke about. This is that transformation process and the time, etc., that you spend on each step in the transformation process. The different levels of control, sorry, that was the wrong way. Preliminary control. So in terms of preliminary control, one of the best examples of where preliminary control went sideways is where the Takata airbags get delivered and 6 million cars have to be recalled. Somewhere, and I know that when you have a long standing strategic relationship with a supplier, that there's an automatic trust in the quality of the components that gets delivered. But 6 million cars to be recalled, that is absolutely insane. So the danger with that kind of long-standing arrangements is that mistakes are repeated. That's a lot of wasted money. That is a heck of a lot of wasted money. And I immediately would start looking elsewhere for somebody to manufacture my airbags. But we've seen, Nissans have leaky petrol tanks. There's so many wobbly bits that go wrong in terms of vehicle recalls. On average, they will recall 7 vehicles. They're also doing airbag recall. Well, Takata supplies to VW, so it would depend on when your VW was built. So it's feasible that yeah, if you have a recent model, they'll be doing that. Oh my gosh. Oh, Mandy, that is hell of interesting. Yeah. Guys, and then screening control. This is the during the transformation process and post-action control. Now, generally, that would be in terms of your production line, your quality control guys would be the guys who come up at the end of the production line and check that all the boxes were ticked. Absolutely, Russigan. The thing in terms of where we are in the world now is that people realize that economies of scale is absolutely everything. But when you have economies of scale and you rush to achieve economies of scale at the expense of quality and spending time on doing things properly, it becomes a real challenge. And to also just say, a place like Takata would be negotiated down so much in order to get their airbags into the different brands that sometimes it's not even their fault because they have been squeezed so badly by the different manufacturers. Because honestly, when you're a Volkswagen, you negotiate tough. You negotiate very tough, and that means that you are pushing your suppliers to the point that they might take shortcuts. And I'm not making excuses, but I think that's the reality of the world. So yeah, in terms of the preliminary control, checking the stuff that come into the transformation process. The second one, screening during the actual transformation process, and at the end, that everything is perfect. Guys, in terms of financial control, yeah, so here we look at different levels of control. Control in terms of our income and expected revenues, and then also controlling the working capital, our retained earnings. I think you guys know what retained earnings is. Retained earnings is often, instead of paying out dividends to your shareholders, you retain your earnings to make capital budget investments so that you don't have to loan so much from banks, and then also the money that flow out of the organization. In terms of budgetary control, yeah, who works on a strict monthly personal budget? Who budgets month to month? Chelsea, you work on a budget. I'm very impressed. Walter, you also work on a budget. I don't have a budget. Russigan, oh my gosh. Oh, Chelsea, that's very impressive. Gerardo also work on a budget. Yeah, no, and it categorizes where it goes. What is that app called, Chelsea? Will you put it on the group, please? Because obviously I'm self-employed. You know, use a notepad. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Guys, in terms of budgets, we know what it's for. It's about controlling your finances. It's making sure from a personal budget that you don't have more months left than you have money left for the month. But it also, in terms of organizations, it allows us to prioritize where we will allocate our resources. It also allows us to check whether managers are managing their units to the point that they have certain levels of performance in terms of income, in terms of paying out, in terms of controlling expenditures. Guys, and then just different budgets. Yeah, a financial budget, obviously the money that will come in as revenue. The operating budget is money allocated to transformations, and the non-monetary budget would be the kinds of things that although we don't measure initially in money, you need to bring back to rads and cents. And you can see hours of labor, machine hours, and all of the knock-on effects. A big cost now in terms of these kinds of budgets and in particular in terms of your operating budget, is diesel because of load shedding. Guys, you can have a glance at some of those. I'm not going to go through those. I'm not too fussed about those. Okay. You can have a glance at that. I'm not going to go through this. We're not going to do ratios. There's no way we're asking you that. Just as an aside, who remembers the liquidity ratios? Which are the two liquidity ratios? Oh my gosh. Acid test and the other one. Well done, Marcus. quick ratio analysis. Is it the quick ratio analysis? Oh, gosh, again, no, now I've got confused myself, guys. Debt ratios, we know what those are. In terms of audits, anyone here work as an auditor? Anyone work as an auditor? You consult with auditors, okay. Yeah, I think we have auditors for specific reasons. It's essentially external audits coming in, making sure that from a company's standard perspective that we adhere to certain financial guidelines. Remember, we are there to look after the interests of our shareholders. And then internal audits, obviously, most companies will have an internal they are super important. An internal auditing function, I think it is that extra step in making sure that you look after the interests of your shareholders. Yeah, guys, I'm not going to worry too much about these. I really am not too fussed about these. And I know that I'm going through it very quickly, and my apologies for that. But I think they're less important. I think at this level, you guys can have a glance at them yourselves as well. Um, I want to, and I'm going to just stop the recording.